Hey there, this is Natalie, and I wanted to thank you for checking out To All the Men I've Tolerated Before. I am very excited because recently I celebrated the podcast's first birthday. And what better way to celebrate than to try and build up this community of tolerators and gather them all in one space? To do that, I launched our Patreon where you can make a monthly contribution to the podcast and get some amazing benefits like early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, some virtual hangout time with me and other tolerators, and other ways to really allow us to get to know one another. Any support that you can give to the podcast will be so helpful in the second year to help me elevate the content and grow our community. There is a link in the show notes that contains all the information you need to help the podcast grow. I love and appreciate every one of you. Happy birthday, Team Tolerator. Hey, Tolerators. This is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, the show where my guests and I chat about where we've gone wrong as a society when it comes to issues aimed at women, but they affect everyone. Today, I'm very happy to introduce you all to Anusha Singh. She is a youth activist in Ohio for period.org, and she's going to be telling me about her work against period poverty. Thank you so much for being part of the team for menstruation to be easier, Anusha.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. This is so exciting. I used to be a teacher, so I used to get to talk to like youthful people all of the time, and now I don't. I have to be a very big adult all of the time. So this is great. So go ahead and tell me what led you to period.org and working against period poverty.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm so pumped to be here. My journey really started when I was a college student. I learned about the tampon tax in Ohio, and throughout my life, I was aware of the period stigma, like most of us are, but I never really realized the true consequences of the period stigma on people. And it wasn't until I learned about the tampon tax and how that, it would tax menstrual products as luxury goods in more than half the country. It was at the time it was in 35 states, including Ohio, which is where I lived. And I just remember that making me really angry. I didn't have any policy background or advocacy background or anything like that. I was, a neuroscience student in college. So this was totally very new to me, but I did want to voice out about this because I felt like there wasn't that much momentum behind bills to repeal the tampon tax in states like Ohio. So that motivated me to start a group in college, and together over the span of 2-3 years, we worked with lawmakers and organized events, press conferences, and really just built a lot of momentum, movement, you could call it, in Ohio. And finally it passed. So that was a huge win for us. And that's really where my journey started.
That's awesome. It's so funny that you bring up that it's kind of like we all know about the period stigma, but we also kind of just accept that this is a part of our reality. And a lot of that, okay, so when I was a kid, we watched, and it came back on Netflix, so maybe you know this show, but my sister and I were obsessed with Degrassi. It's like a Canadian teen soap drama. And I remember there was the main character, Emma, and she got her period for the first time while she was wearing white jeans. And the fact that that was how every person who menstruated's first period always went on a sitcom or a drama or anything. It's always we're embarrassed, it snuck up on us, we don't even know how to handle this, and all of it.
That is such a true point that you made, because now I'm seeing more instances in the media where it's not as embarrassing. It's becoming more normalized in a way, not something like gross or anything like that, but more of like something that's natural, shows like Bridgerton. I'm not sure if you've seen that season 1. They actually depicted a scene with like what looked like actual period blood. So that was interesting. Seeing it more normalized in the media. There was also Turning Red, a Disney movie, which it just makes me so happy to see all these instances in the media where people are challenging this stigma more and more, not treating it as something really gross or even an illness, but something that's like natural.
And especially with Turning Red, which I know that a lot of Disney fans didn't even know what to do with that movie, because they're like, why is this something that we would need to cover? And it's like, because a large part of the population, this is just something that is part of everyone's life. Like, so
Exactly.
why wouldn't it just pop up naturally into a movie or a show or things like that? I had forgotten about that for Bridgerton. I just finished season 2. But yeah, you're right. We are starting to like turn the tide. And then there are the people who are either in my generation or older who are so uncomfortable with that going on. And I mean, when I grew up, it was totally normal for me to just be panicked the entire day. Like, okay, do I take my purse to the bathroom with me? And then is everyone watching me go to the bathroom being like, ooh, she has her purse? Or like, do I try to like stuff it in my pocket real quick, or the waistband of my jeans? Like, where do I hide this so no one knows what I'm going through today?
I know there's still so much shame around such a normal process. I remember reading, I don't know if you've heard of it, but Gloria Steinem, she wrote this satirical essay about if men could menstruate. And I found it hilarious because it was an essay about, if men could menstruate, they would be competing with each other over whose menstrual cycles are longer. It would become like a badge of honor rather than something to be ashamed about. And I thought it was so eye-opening because it really points to the patriarchy and how, it's been almost weaponized as a tool of shame. And because of that, so many young people don't have the vocabulary to articulate, what is normal about their periods, and even voice out about menstruation and talk about periods without feeling ashamed about it. And I see this, it manifests in inequitable policies as well that actually leads to like systemic issues like period poverty that are so overlooked because people are not even willing to talk about periods. And people are, because of that source of shame and stigma around it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, very little knowledge in the medical field over here at my end, but it just opens up, it almost allows there to be all of these excuses for why people who aren't the normal white cisgender male have all of these medical issues, because it's like, well, they're the norm and that's who we base everything off of. And if you are a person who menstruates or a woman giving birth or anything, we just kind of roll the dice on what will happen with you.
Exactly. It's it's really unfair, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's like menstruators, there's so many things I could talk about, like menstrual leave, and which are becoming more and more talked about. But yeah, I agree with you.
I am in love with Nicole Byer and her best friend Sashir, whose last name I never remember. But I saw one of her comedy bits where she addresses the fact that she goes, well, now we have evidence that the pain that people experience during their menstrual cycle is as serious as the pain that you experience as when you're having a heart attack. And we're just like, expected to live through it.
I know. That was a really interesting study, like to think it's comparable to that. Right. Yet like there's such limited research about menstrual pain, menstrual health, and that just blew my mind, I think. And it makes me almost want to carry around some like period cramp simulator just to like have
just to like
and try it out.
Just to like ambush men with, like, try it. I don't know. Maybe you'll understand it. Have you had a heart attack? That's what I do every month. Like
every month. I know.
Well, and When I was growing up, the only real option that doctors would give you if you were experiencing, I had horrendous period pain when I was in college to the point where I would be debilitated for like 2 days out of my period, just like fetal
Yeah.
position, sobbing, curled up, waiting for it to be over, the light, blindness, all of it. To which people told me that I was very dramatic. They were like, "Oh, you're very dramatic on your period, like just crying all the time." And I'm like, because it feels like dying. If I had to put a feeling to dying, this is what it would be. And the only real option that doctors had for me was like, well, maybe the pill, like, will suss out your hormones and fix it. And we're starting to gain so much information about what happens to your body if you've been on the pill as long as I've been on the pill.
I know, and this is so understudied, and unfortunately, it's not taken seriously. When women voice out about this, to be more inclusive, we call everyone menstruators to account for
Mhm.
say to account for the LGBTQ plus community as well.
Yeah.
But the fact that menstruators, um, complaints aren't taken seriously a lot of the time when it comes to pain and tolerance and there's so many studies showing how menstruators and especially marginalized groups, they're prescribed less painkillers, fewer
Mhm.
painkillers, because their pain is not taken as seriously when they're speaking to physicians. And, I think this is, seeing studies that reveal, oh, it's similar to the pain of a heart attack. I think that's so important because um, people don't understand how serious it is, right? Like how important it is to talk about menstrual health. I have so many friends, for example, I had a friend who learned she had endometriosis, but at a much later age. And she's thought, I wish I knew about this at a younger age. I wish I could have, but nobody was talking about menstrual disorders. This is not, in schools and there's no like menstrual health education that's at my school. So I think that education component is so necessary to
Mhm.
in school and talking about these issues.
And I know personally for me, especially because if you are a menstruator, there's a good chance that you're spending a portion of your life in discomfort and pain. It's hard to go to the doctor and when they get with something else and going, okay, so that hurts. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does it hurt? Well, I don't know because I live with this all the time. So does it hurt more? Does it hurt worse? Is this serious? Is this not? The way
Yeah,
that we talk about this thing that happens to our bodies really negates anything else we could be going through.
100%. Not knowing what's normal, what's not normal. I was actually working with a physician on a project and shadowing her as she would meet a lot of adolescent patients, and
Mhm.
she specializes in menstrual disorders and treating those. And so many patients come to our office, young girls, talking about how they don't know if their periods are normal, but it's very painful. And she always says, if you're here in my office, that means it's painful. Let's acknowledge that menstrual pain needs to be um, you know, prioritized. She
Yeah.
like from a very, needs to be treated from a place of compassion and, not telling patients that they're, overly sensitive and really, yeah, really prioritizing that patient's care. That just reminded me of that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad she's also doing the work. There are so many instances where people are so afraid to come to their doctors with issues or feel like they're going to be talked down to or ignored. And especially now that we're in an age where anxiety and depression are at the forefront of a lot of things that we have to be dealing with, to think about the effort that it takes to even A, witness that something is wrong, B, make an appointment to see what's wrong, and then carry that out to then be ignored or talked down to or be told, like, everyone goes through this. Like, everyone's period is painful.
I know, like it takes so much courage to even recognize and to even go to the physician and recognize that, oh, maybe something's not right here, with like a very limited conversation about, what's normal, what's not normal, especially because I talk to a lot of young girls and their family, and this I relate to this as well because I never had anyone I could talk to about menstruation. I didn't feel comfortable talking about it, and didn't know what was normal, what was not normal. But I think it's so important that from a young age that, a lot of times, because I think a lot of times, young girls are not able to learn about periods, as early as they get them. So it's a very delayed conversation, but we need to be having these conversations at a younger age, about menstruation, menstrual health, what's normal, what's not normal, starting, I think, in the 4th, 5th grade even. Because, these days, the age of starting a period is getting younger and younger. And because it's grouped with sex ed a lot of the time, which is not taught until high school, there's like this huge education gap. And when it is taught at younger grades and, 5th grade, I remember when I was taught about menstrual health at that age, we were taught about it in gender segregated classrooms.
Same here.
And I just thought, and then on the way out of the classroom, the teachers told us not to talk about what we learned with anyone, and told us to hide. We received period products, pads and tampons. They told us to hide them in the lockers, and especially not discuss anything we learned with boys. And I remember thinking, wow, if nearly half of the population menstruates, why is it such a stigmatized topic?
Right.
That part of it is also, it just stayed with me. It really perpetuated from a young age and in so many young girls that this is such a taboo topic.
My friend recently went on a cruise with her family for spring break, and she happened to start her period on the cruise and was not prepared. Happens to the best of us. She's even more diligent about her stuff than I am, has an app and everything, and just completely blown out of the water. The cruise line and the gift shops on the boat had 0 period products. And when she went to medical services to be like, well, I need period products because you're not selling them, I tried to buy them, they told her that she could have 2 free period products a day.
Wow.
And she went, I need you to know that 2 isn't enough, and I will free bleed on everything in this boat if that's the only option you're going to give me. That's and amazing. Then she also made a point. She goes, I went to that gift store and there were 18 different types of lubes and 45 different types of condoms. So everyone could participate in an orgy on this boat, but no one's allowed to menstruate.
That is, talk about priorities, right? I mean, that is so, I'm not even, I want to say I'm shocked, but also I had a similar experience where I was volunteering at a hospital. And, you would think that menstrual products are prioritized as medical necessities, just the way, and provided at least in restrooms, just the way toilet paper is, or at least available in the gift shop, to buy them. But I was surprised that even in a hospital where I volunteered at, you could not find them anywhere. You had to maybe ask a nurse. There were so many barriers to accessing these. So actually that motivated me to advocate for it at the hospital I volunteer at. And I got to meet with some of like the administration of the hospital. So, and I think it was, they never even realized that this was a gap, it never really brought to their attention. So I think that lack of awareness, and because most of the leadership were non-menstruators, it was composed of men who don't menstruate. But when I brought forth, this is an issue, they were actually very accepting of it once they realized, it is a problem that they never really considered before. Because I think that just stresses how we need more, not menstruators in leadership, but decision-making positions, whether that's on a cruise or in a hospital, need them as part of the conversation, because I can't believe that a cruise or a hospital would not have free period products available,
where you're literally at least on the cruise, the hospital also has no excuse, but when I'm on a cruise, I'm in the middle of the sea.
That too. You can't even run off to a CVS next door.
No, it's not like I can just go to Target. I'm in the middle of the ocean. There's no Target to be had. But my place of work, the building that I work in, the women's restrooms don't have period receptacles, where you put your period products after they've been used. You literally have to carry it out with you to the main garbage.
Oh gosh.
been, which of course like kicks up all of my teenage anxiety about my period, but also I'm like, this is disgusting. I haven't been able to wash my hands or anything yet. You're forcing me into a situation where like I have to like parade this in front of anyone else who might be in the bathroom. And also it's a germ issue. Like I believe we have those for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, it just blows my mind. I mean, that's what happens when you don't have, menstruators kind of part of those like decision making roles. Any, menstruator in that position would, especially maybe in the janitorial staff team or whatever it is, propose that, oh, we should have dispensers in each bathroom stall, or not dispensers, sorry, disposal units in each bathroom stall. But yeah, I'm shocked, really.
I'm always shocked. I'm always just blown away. And then I'm like, wait, you have an entire podcast about misogyny and the patriarchy. Why are you still shocked? Like,
that reminds me of like when I was advocating for products at my university. We met with their university's administrators and they mentioned what was it? Oh, yeah. Instead of having free period products available in the restrooms, why don't we have RAs distribute them? So those are residential advisors. Those are other students on the same floor that are responsible for the other students on the floor. So they said, oh, like maybe one person can be a pinpoint, like a point person that people can approach when they need free period products. That'll save us a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, those additional barriers that adds discomfort for people who need products. That should not be there. It's I just was like blown away by some of these ideas. I thought, wow, in reality, is it really reaching the people who need them the most? Right? And
so you had period.org sent me this fantastic it was a whole TED talk on YouTube about how you went in front of Ohio legislators and you talked about why the period tax is such a huge component of period poverty. Can you walk through what that day was like and what some of the hurdles you experienced during that day or leading up to that day were?
Yeah, for sure. So some of the lawmakers who introduced the bill, they actually invited me to testify on the bill because I started a group on campus at my university to destigmatize this issue of period poverty and also raise awareness about tampon tax. And so I was, so honored to be able to testify. I was about 19 at the time. So it was just about, 3-4 years ago. And I remember feeling a lot of pressure at the same time because I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to represent this issue. And also a lot of other young people who want to make their voices heard in front of a group of lawmakers. I didn't want to disappoint, my student group and other students who I also invited to sort of support me and sit behind me and watch the testimony as sort of like moral support. To also show lawmakers, it's not just me behind this issue. There's a whole community of people on our campus and, young people, but also, people from different backgrounds. And I think that, that meant a lot to me. But I remember the second I mentioned the word period on the House floor, several lawmakers had some interesting reactions that I was very surprised by because up till that point, I felt like I was very much in my own bubble on campus where people, openly, did not feel so much shame talking about periods as much. But being in a room with like predominantly older white men who did not feel comfortable talking about periods, that became very apparent to me that they were ashamed of it. A few of them even rolled their eyes at me from across the room. Some of them, many of them refused to make eye contact. They had my testimony on their iPad, so they wouldn't said like look down, and some of them, they couldn't even repeat the word period after me. So when they were asking me questions about, because after you testify, they have an opportunity to ask questions, but they, none of them could talk about, say the word period even and look me in the eyes and say that. So I think that left me with an even bigger question of, how is it that our lawmakers who are not even comfortable with talking about periods or discussing periods are responsible for making legislation that affects people who menstruate.
Right.
I was really shocked.
And I mean, imagine if all of those lawmakers had in the fourth grade also gone through some sort of education where they were told, like, this is a period and this is why you need to be comfortable with it. These old white men, everyone's favorite people, can't even make eye contact with you. And the kicker of that is they're literally in charge of our fate. Like, and they're men who refused to like be in the room with their wife while they were giving birth because they were like, I don't want to see her body do that.
I know. I think it's so connected to also education. I was reading a study the other day that I think 76% of students feel that they're taught more about the biology of a frog in school than of the human female body, the reproductive body. And so that is so shocking, but is it really? And that leads to poor education, lack of conversation about this leads to a room full of grown people not being able to talk about this issue.
Well, and that's the thing too, like as a person who is newly a grown up in her 30s, you think that like, oh my gosh, here I am standing in front of the grown-ups who make laws and they can't even be mature about this. And I just recorded an episode. I mean, we talk about shame on the podcast all the time, but our society is so rooted in reproductive shame and what actually happens in our family. I begged a gynecologist who also has a podcast to come onto the show because I just don't feel like I've been taught all of the things that I should be taught as a 30-year-old woman about my body. And I feel like it's a direct result of the shame that we feel about sex, our bodies, and all of it in this country.
I agree. There is just such a huge gap. I feel like there's so much I don't know myself that I'm continuing to learn more of. There being this movement, but it should be so much more accessible, not just to people who menstruate, but also to people who don't menstruate, so that when they are, because the reality is most decision-making bodies, higher level ones, they're composed of people who don't menstruate. How do we expect them to have empathy towards struggles that menstruators face, right? You mentioned period pain earlier. And that's a huge, reason why there's so many advocates pushing for menstrual leave, paid menstrual leave for people who experience period pain, because it's not talked about, but at the same time it's controversial for many, it's a controversial issue. But at the same time, I don't expect any of these policies to ever pass or even be introduced without any cultural shift. I always say policy change follows cultural change, and we need a lot of cultural change, when it comes to women's reproductive health, especially.
Menstrual leave. I especially think now after COVID, after we've learned that a lot of jobs that everyone lied to us and told couldn't be done from home, could be done from home. You think that things like lenient sick leave, menstrual leave, being a parent and needing parental leave would be so much easier to execute now. And I just feel like it's a patriarchal power play to go, but we won't, because capitalism dictates that you have to be working.
I know, right? And it's just so unfair. And I think it's so, even if we did pass the policy, like maybe menstrual leave became a thing, I think so much cultural change is necessary before that happens, because it could also be used, like, for example, if a menstruator does choose to take menstrual leave and it's there as an option, is that a means for them to be discriminated against for promotion? This person, I see that all the time with like, leaves for new mothers, and, when they opt to take those leaves, even like paternal leave, or I think that's what it's called. For new fathers, like that's still very stigmatized, and oftentimes people are passed up for promotions or opportunities, and because they choose to take this. And I can't imagine the level of pushback there would be for menstrual leave, especially it's a very new thing. Would that be taken seriously? Would people view it as, people using it as an excuse to not work? Like there's so many, in that way, I feel like there's a lot of cultural and mindsets that need to change as well before these policies are even implemented.
Around work and all of it. And I think it starts with the misconception that our periods just make us a little bit crampy. Once I turned 30, my PMS shifted from the cramping to just flat out fatigue, like zombie mind fog, not at 100% fatigue. I've experienced migraines because of my period, light sensitivity, dizziness, nausea, all of it. And it literally gets boiled down to, you think you'd be able to deal with this by now.
I know it's ridiculous. I think the association, association with like, PMS, and it's almost used to discredit menstruators in leadership positions, they are not capable of being a good leader, because they're too emotional for the role, or because their menstrual cycle makes them too emotional, or makes them, make bad decisions just because they're a menstruator. And in association with menstrual cycles, which is so, I think that needs to change. Like that's another effect of the period stigma is, women being viewed as incompetent leaders simply because of that. When, I'm, most of the wars I'm seeing in the world are driven by men, led by men. So, I mean, if anything, I would argue the opposite.
I love to ask people, I go, have you ever tried to tell a privileged man no? If you want to see a tantrum, you should try. Like, you ever see a man give you the silent treatment for a week because you asked him something out of your own comfort and asked him to be considerate, and that all of a sudden embarrassed or offended him? But okay, we're the emotional ones. It's fine.
Are the emotional ones. Okay.
Yeah. I also feel, because this happens with maternity leave, that if we were to also have menstrual leave, I could see it being like, okay, we'll just widen that pay gap then, because now they want off for their periods. Like they had off to have a baby.
I know. It's just, will it even help us at the end if people don't change their minds, if there's not that mindset shift about, about menstruation as a whole, that it's not something that makes women worse leaders. And it, we need that source of like empathy in the workplace,
Right.
We need more of that.
I think
because if anything, it could help us. I actually met with this menstrual cycle coach, and she said, the 9 to 5 days, like all, it's part of the patriarchy, women, because of the way our hormones are, it's normal for us to not be, operate the same every single day. And she's like, it's all about optimizing your menstrual cycles. Maybe it'll make us more productive to have menstrual leaves in the workplace, because we take that time to rest. And also, that would at the end of the day even make us more productive if we're able to, be informed about our menstrual cycles and how our energy like fluctuates throughout it. And, it's not really talked about, because men, their hormones are not all over the place like ours are. But yeah.
But yeah, because let me tell you, when I'm experiencing a period migraine or period fatigue or whatever, you're really getting a lot out of me, capitalism, when I'm just lying with my head on my desk, but going like, I'm here. You can't dock me because I showed up today, but I will just be laying my head down.
Exactly. I think that accomplishes, what does that accomplish? It's like the 9, versus having a more empathetic culture towards menstruators.
And I truly feel like we've been in denial about how quickly we can do things now because of technology and all of it. So now all of a sudden the 9 to 5 day is truly obsolete, because I can get done almost 4 times as much as I could have when the 9 to 5 became in existence. So at this point, there's so much that has to change about work culture in general. I personally don't claim my anxiety and depression when they survey you about like, okay, what's your race? What's your gender? Do you have a disability? Because I'm like, well, that's what I need, is for them to know, well, is she sick or is she just a little anxious? Is she on vacation or is she having a meltdown? There's just so many stigmas that get to perpetuate thanks to my lovely friend capitalism.
I know, right? And people don't feel valued in the workplace then, as a result of that. When there's no empathy and leadership, how do I expect them to feel empathetic to what I'm experiencing as a menstruator if they've never experienced it, they've never talked about it, they're not informed about it?
Do you remember some of the ways that they avoided using the word period? Like, did they say like the event in question?
Yeah, the situation.
Oh.
It's very interesting, like totally just try to avoid that. as a whole, like the word period itself, like none of them could
Mhm.
even like say that. Yeah, they say like, oh, like how did the situation impact you, or how, like I just laughed at it so much because it. Yeah, like a lot of times it's very common when I have conversations with lawmakers, especially male lawmakers, not being able to talk about periods. I'm trying to think of other words they've used,
Yeah.
but just trying to, beat around the bush. And, a lot of times they also stress that, they don't like to hear graphic details about period poverty and menstrual health. And even though it's very connected to why we want to pass the policy. So a lot of times that would inform, like as an advocate, what types of arguments do I push forward to persuade people who don't menstruate, and maybe politicians across the aisle. How do I persuade them to come on board and support this? So that meant I needed to appeal to the fact, this affects the family unit as a whole. It's not just a women's issue, because maybe that's something that they're passionate about. It leads to undue burdens on families.
Mhm.
And because they didn't want to hear about how it was a fight for gender equality necessarily. Like, it's so interesting
Yeah.
how we would have to speak in their language on this to win them on board. Just points to how much shame and stigma there is. But we had to play that game as well to win them over.
I appreciate that you went for the family unit argument. I would assume that because they were powerful white men, you had to be like, you don't understand. Eventually, if a person experiencing poverty is using all of these inhumane and unsanitary ways to control their period, you, as the person in power, will have to give up money for that when that person ends up in the hospital, and just gaslight them about their money. That's
Yeah,
what
honestly,
that's
I
where
know.
I assumed you'd have to go, is just like be like, this will affect your money, which is the only thing you care about. So
I know, and the financial argument was totally valid. We used that as well, especially when it came to repealing the tax on
mhm.
products. And this would save families a lot of money. And so it would, especially, I remember one lawmaker testifying, and he said, oh yeah, I heard it's like the breadwinner of the household, like his income, like nothing about how it affects women or menstruators. But it just goes back to how they've never obviously experienced menstruation, but because of their lack of knowledge about it, they only see it through their own viewpoints. And another way we would try to appeal to them was using, instead of saying, oh, it's going to impact the women in Michigan or women of Ohio, more relatable language where they could picture someone in their lives who they care about, who's a menstruator, who would be impacted by the policy. So for example, maybe like saying, oh, like as a daughter, I like when I would introduce myself, I wouldn't just say, oh, I'm a student, but also I'm a daughter. I am, using relatable language, because in their heads, many lawmakers have daughters as well. They have wives, mothers, and using more relatable language that that help them picture someone in their head that they care about and sort of win over support. So I think those strategies worked as well, because it's all about empathy at the end of the day. I keep saying this, but
No.
do they
Well,
understand?
it's a huge theme on the podcast. Like, imagine if we had a society that was built on empathy instead of finances. Like, just imagine for a moment. And I think because that happens a lot in sexual assault cases too, where it's like you can't care about this person, the victim, because you don't know about her and you're not really invested or anything. So I'm going to trick you into picturing your sister, your daughter, your mother, or anybody on the stand so that you care, because we can't just care about the collective.
Exactly. It's I mean, it should, like, that shouldn't be the case, but
Mm-hmm.
we have to do what we have to do to like convince legislators to pass more equitable legislation.
Uh, my
Oh my
father
God.
just my father just likes to, if he's afraid that I'm on my period when I'm visiting and that he may come across a rogue tampon or pad, he likes to just like wave his hand in front of my body, like, so are you like, do you have to take out the garbage this week? And I'm like, do I have to take out the garbage in your home as a guest? He's like, I mean, do you, like, is there a thing
That is so
happening?
interesting. No, that is no, I was actually reading, like, on that note, there was a study. It surveyed about like 90,000 people across like 150, more than 150 countries. It was done by Clue, and they found that there's more than 5,000 ways to talk about periods, 5,000 ways to say the word period. And like, and I'm like, wow, like, what does that say about the shame around menstruation?
I
Like,
guess.
so many different ways. And the different phrase, it was so ridiculous, different languages, they translated them to English, from, I think in Finland it was like mad cow disease, and like like referring to periods, like the most like shocking things, like all of these euphemisms around menstruation. One was like the communists are coming, and then the other one is like cranberry woman, and all of these like in reference to like menstruation, where I don't know, I thought
No,
it's
ant
hilarious.
flow,
Ant
all of
flow
it.
is one.
Riding the Red Sea. Just so many poetic ways to talk about what's going on in my body. I remember sitting in a college course. It was one of my core classes. We all had to take it, and we were learning about medieval times. And I remember a female professor explaining to us that back when doctors in medieval times would address women issues and hysteria or PMS or any of it, they would say that your womb was wandering throughout your body. So, like, if I had a headache, it's because my womb went searching for a baby to inhabit it and ended up in my head. And that's how I got a headache.
That is so crazy. That's the cause of every illness, right?
Yeah.
It's just the womb.
The womb. My womb went a traveling and was like, is there a baby in her tummy? No, maybe her head. And I
Oh my
could.
God. That is like, even the word menstruation, I'm trying to remember. I think he meant something along the lines of like illness or
Mhm.
something, like it translates that in another language, or it was like derived from another language where it meant illness or something along those lines. Or I'm trying to remember. I think it was illness or disease, something, along those lines. And I just remember thinking, wow, no, that like historically, like even the language and everything
Yeah.
is rooted in
Historically, I believe they called it the infliction every once in a while. Like, are you on your womanly infliction? Like, has it
wow.
taken over you? Like, what a lovely term. Thank you. Yes. My
God.
womb plague has happened again, as it will for the rest of my life. So, we have two traditions on To All the Men I've Tolerated Before, where we talk about our biggest takeaway from being in a position where we have to live with things like period stigma and period poverty. And then we walk forward in positivity and we manifest for our culture and society where they could head next. So, out of all of this amazing and brave work that you've done, what do you think has been the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself or how you interact with the world?
That's a really good question. Oh my God, there's so many things. But if I were to pick one, something that I've learned about myself and the way I interact with the world would be that change is very slow. Like
Hmm.
cultural, like, it takes time. But that being said, in order to spur that change, cultural change, it's so necessary for people like yourself and I, like, to share our stories with the world about, about to destigmatize issues like menstrual health, for example, and women's reproductive health as a whole. I think it's going to take time, but I think having more voices who are unapologetically speaking about these issues to especially to people who don't experience them or don't are not as familiar with them. It's through these conversations over time that we're going to start seeing, that systemic change is achieved, right? That
Yeah.
policies are more equitable policies are passing. But I think it's going to take time. But I also feel optimistic about so many more people being brave enough and having the courage to challenge the stigmas that are out there around women's reproductive health. I mean, that is for so long it's been so normalized,
Mm-hmm.
something that we were supposed to accept, that this is the way things are. But I think generation after generation, studies are showing that people are feeling more and more comfortable than their parents' generation to talk about periods. And to me, that gives me a lot of hope. Obviously there's so many, like, they're also revealing a lot of gaps in our educational systems and things that, where I want to see change now, because this is a crisis, and it's so overlooked. It's been overlooked for generations. Menstrual health, menstrual poverty, but I'm very optimistic that through having these conversations, that hopefully, like, people will start to open their eyes up to these issues. We'll see more menstruators in decision-making roles that can really create more change, and also, like, throughout the process, hopefully create more empathy amongst people who don't menstruate to understand some of our struggles. So
Yeah. I'm going to piggyback off of your biggest lesson. I think what I've learned is that I can start sleeping easier because there are people doing the work. I think a lot of time work like this feels very lonely because it feels like you're the only person talking about it or pushing people to think about it and things like that. So it's very refreshing to me people in your situation where it's like, these are all of the things I've tried and done, and this is what I've achieved, because it just makes us feel like we're part of a bigger community and it's not all on us. And moving forward, I would just love for everyone to jump on board with, instead of walking forward in shame or not understanding or ignorance, you actually ask the questions that would lead you to have a better understanding of what's going on in my body or anyone else's body that you might be experiencing. So instead of blaming a person for having cramps and not being perky that day, lean into it.
I know, right? Embrace that this is normal, and yeah, be more accepting and empathetic towards people about, like, what's totally normal. This should be a normal conversation. It should be totally normal, like, at the workplace, to tell your boss, hey, I'm having menstrual cramps, instead of having to make up an excuse like, oh, I'm sick, or oh, I am, because menstruation is not an illness, and that only perpetuates it when we have to make up other excuses that are taken up more seriously by society. Like, if we were to say a heart attack, we have a heart attack, I have a heart attack, they would be like, oh, take off all the time you need. But when it comes to menstruation, they're like, oh, like, can you, like, it's not taken as seriously. So that needs to change.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Please let the listeners know how they can connect with you, period.org, any of your work. I would love to know, because I'm in Ohio too, any and all events I could attend. I'd love to make a sign and hold it.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm so glad you mentioned that. We're planning a lobby day in Ohio. Don't have a date yet, but hopefully this summer, because it's an election year, to talk to lawmakers and really pressure them to support more menstrual equity legislation in Ohio, because we've already repealed the Ohio tampon tax a few years ago, so it's now time to push for more. So I'll keep you updated about that in Ohio. But yes, I'm you can follow us on at Period Movement. That's our Instagram page for the movement as a whole. But me personally, I'm also on Instagram. I post about advocacy and ways that people can also get involved. And you can follow me at Anusha_Singh without the H. So
Anusha, it was so great to get to talk to you and meet you. I'm so proud of you and just in awe of you and all of the bravery and the like leaps and bounds that you've done compared to people that I know who are also in this fight. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
No, thank you so much for having me as part of your amazing podcast. I think, these conversations that you're bringing forth are so important. I'm so thrilled to be part of this. And that's amazing you're in Ohio. I'll definitely keep you in the loop about.
Yes. I'm in the Dayton area.
I was born there. So.
Oh yeah. Awesome. And tolerators, you know what to do. Hopefully there was a nice little commercial at the beginning of this about the new Patreon, the fireside show, following us at Men I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram, where you can find all of the links to support us. And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything that you're tolerating, especially being in a really discomforting place with your period or your cramps or anything, and people telling you to toughen up and just kind of grit through it. Smiles are for joy.